Welcome to Facts TV News, where everything is true. JHTA head signals support of Prime Minister's call for reform Heart and STA Trust. At least one industry leader agrees with Prime Minister Andrew Holness that there needs to be a reform in relation to the Heart and STA Trust fulfilling its mandate. President of the Jamaica Hotel and Tourist Association, JHTA Clifton Reader, shared his view.
I believe there's definitely a need for reform, but the reform should take place alongside organizations like mine, putting in our contribution as well. I remember many years ago, a reform was done, and the late Dr. Ben Henry, myself, and a few others were asked to contribute to the curriculum of HART. And we went in, and I think we concentrated more on the housekeeping and food and beverage side of things. Those days, you could literally take a person from HART and put in your dining room, and that person would be able to function, because I think being under the Ministry of Education, you have more bureaucratic processes going through, and maybe the practical nature of the training is not coming through. So my suggestion would be to engage us in the industry so that we can partner with you to tell you exactly what we're looking for. In our partnership with HART, I think I would like to see, a great recruiting process from the schools, from communities, and of course the industry can help with that. Another thing that is very important is that on-the-job training program that I know that they're doing, but maybe as not as effective as before. So definitely we would want to be able to train the people on the job, and they be certified in a practical way by HART. I know for one that in some countries the work permit requirement is that you give back to training institutions. So once per month, an expat chef should be able to go into an institution like HART to do practical demonstrations, because technology will change, practices will change in the hotel industry. And these people who are coming in must not come in for 2 years, 3 years, or whatever, and leave with their knowledge. There should be a formal way of transferring that knowledge to our people.
In the meantime, Acting Deputy Managing Director of Heart and STA Trust, Kenisha Campbell, says the institution will be ramping up its trust to have industry players more engaged in student training.
The trust is re-looking and going back to that model that the training is supported and guided by industry, so that the person who leads a HART training program can seamlessly fit into the industry. And so we are moving back to that approach. The strategic plan seeks to youth development and the strategies that we will use to expand youth development, but it also speaks to us expanding our access to training programs and increasing our response to our customers, not only firms, but other stakeholders that we serve. And that permeates the strategic plan of the organization.
Tourism Minister expects more than $2 billion in investment in the sector over the next 3 years. Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett says new and existing investors in the industry are expected to spend more than $2 billion over the next 3 years in rebuilding the sector. Jamaica's tourism industry has earned over $2 billion and attracted more than 1 million visitors since the start of the year. Mr. Bartlett says just about 61% of tourism workers have returned to their jobs after this sector was forced to close down due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
We are going to end the year with 1.6 million visitors, earning for Jamaica over $2 billion. We've been able to bring back our workers in the main. We lost 130,000 during the COVID. We are now about 80,000 back. We've been able to bring back our investors, almost all of them. And we are now looking at 7,000 new rooms to come on board over the next 3 to 4 years, and some $2 billion of foreign exchange expenditure, creating an additional 20,000 jobs for our people. This period must see a new investment response from our local entrepreneurs to drive the production side of tourism so that the supplies that we need to ensure that the consumption patterns of the tourists can be met are owned and driven by our own people. We are building back and reimagining tourism in a new way, a more inclusive tourism, that which involves all our players together, and a tourism that is going to see a greater involvement of the main drivers of the industry, entertainers, our cultural partners, our agricultural partners, our manufacturing partners, our transportation partners, our craft vendors, and our artisans.
Cabinet Minister calls for more short-term rehabilitation programs for juvenile center detainees. Minister without portfolio for national security, Senator Matty Samudo, says persons incarcerated in juvenile centers need more short-term rehabilitation programs. Senator Samudo was speaking at the opening of a recording studio at the Metcalf Street Secure Juvenile Center in Denham Town. He explained that the government has to approach rehabilitation tactically.
One of the issues you have with kids in remand centers is that you don't know how long they're going to be within the facilities. So the sorts of rehab activities that you put in have to be shorter in nature to trigger interest and to bring about certain results. You can't necessarily plan a 2-year program in the way that you know the length of a sentence in a real progress situation, so you're better able to tailor the educational programs. So we need as many programs like this that trigger that intrigue and interest in the process of learning to make that change for them when they leave us. Anything is possible. And if we look at this as a starting point where we use it to trigger that same intrigue and interest that I know I would have had in music at that time in 2001, to trigger that intrigue and interest in something other than criminality and other than dysfunctional behavior, then the possibilities truly are endless. Because many of these young people may not be able to sing, they may not necessarily have the creativity to build a rhythm, but the very working of a mixing board or the very working of a computer may trigger other interests for them that open up a whole new world. I can tell you, it would be impossible for my politics, Dr. Chan, to have gotten where it has in this time frame if not for my own interaction in music and entertainment. I credit the entire size of my network to that initial foray in entertainment and music.
COVID-19 booster shots available to all adults, says Health Ministry. Health and Wellness Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton says everyone 18 years and older can be administered a COVID-19 shot and should visit centers across the island to have it done. The Health and Wellness Minister made the announcement while addressing the weekly COVID Conversations virtual media conference last evening. The announcement follows the receipt of additional batch of 204,000 doses of the Pfizer vaccine, a gift from the U.S.
Having received the additional Pfizer, which is the most common booster across the brands that are currently being offered, we now have sufficient stock, and as a result, we have taken the decision to expand our booster program to all Jamaicans over 18 years old who qualify for a booster shot. Starting immediately, all who qualify, all age cohort over 18 can now take a booster. We have the inventory, we have the stocks to support this. We now have just under 400,000 doses of Pfizer, 396,630 to be exact. In storage, AstraZeneca, some 386,100. For Johnson & Johnson, we have 130,635. And for Sinopharm, we have 198,470. So we have in our inventory, when combined, some 1.11 million 835 doses of vaccines. Vaccine availability is not the issue. If we were to utilize this quantity to apply the dosage that is necessary to complete the full initial dose, barring booster shots, we could inoculate some 625,000 citizens or Jamaicans. We have no complaints. And indeed, the concern now is to get rid of, in the proper way, the vaccines that we have in inventory. The travel ban on the African countries as a result of the new variant that was discovered recently, Omicron, has been lifted with immediate effect. So persons traveling from these countries, South Africa and the other countries, are now able to travel, of course, observing the protocols that are in place, the testing before entry and so on.
Greenshield residents on high alert following slaying of goat farmers, says MP. Westmoreland Western Member of Parliament Morland Wilson says residents of Greenshield in the parish are disturbed by the gruesome killing of goat farmers in the community. This incident comes weeks after 2 alleged animal thieves were cut down in a reported gunfight with the police in St. Mary. MP Wilson says the residents are on high alert at this time.
Can say that the people are very disturbed. The type of crime that was conducted, the way it was done, the farmers being targeted, the community is very upset. And especially when these persons are hard-working Jamaicans. They are just trying to make a living and try to survive, feed their families, and live a good life. Mm-hmm. So this is quite unfortunate, Cliff. I am imploring everyone using this medium to work with the police to give what information you may have. Well, the farmers, they are known to the community. They are known as farmers. They go out each day with their herd, a herd of 60-plus goats. So they are quite familiar with the routine of these individuals. And when they go out, they would go out all day and they will have their goats graze in various fields, and then they will come back in the evening. What happened apparently is that they were bounded, they were tied, their hands were bounded behind their backs, and they were put together and what appears to be an execution. Well, remember, Cliff, that it's farming, so when you're talking about farming, it will be somewhat off the beaten path. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't feed your goat close to the urban center. It will be areas where there is lush vegetation for the goats to get grass. Yes. So it's a bit off. Mm-hmm. This is, as I said, this is a routine. They will traditionally go out every day.
PAHO urging member countries to be prepared to use new drugs for treating COVID-19. Director of the Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, Dr. Carissa Instini, is urging member countries to be prepared to leverage and deploy new pharmaceutical drugs being developed to combat COVID-19. She noted that several promising new drugs are in late-stage development to reduce the high levels of hospitalizations and death.
Right now, there are a few promising new drugs in late-stage development that may help us treat COVID and thus avoid hospitalizations and prevent deaths. If they are approved by regulatory authorities, we must be ready to leverage these technologies, building on the lessons of the last 2 years. We urge countries in our region to heed the advice of the WHO expert committees, whose jobs it is to carefully review the safety and efficacy of drugs and recommend when, where, and how to deploy them. As new treatments gain final approvals, countries and companies alike must work together to ensure that everyone who can benefit from these tools has timely access to them at a price that our countries can afford. As we've seen with COVID vaccines, procurement and supply can be major barriers, and that's why we need to start working now to expand production capacity for these life-saving tools, including in our own region, so countries don't remain completely dependent on pharmaceutical imports. We worry that many of the countries that have been hardest hit by COVID, including many countries in our region, do not qualify for these pledges. Without additional support, our countries, many of them, will be left behind. PAHO is tracking this closely and is on deck to support countries to find alternative solutions to guarantee access to future COVID therapeutic tools, including antivirals.
Island Traffic Authority seeking to introduce driver education in high schools. The Island Traffic Authority is seeking to collaborate with the Ministry of Education to introduce a driver education program in high schools. This was disclosed by Minister of Transport Robert Montague while speaking at the launch at the $10 million Ferry Police Station renovation project on Tuesday. Mr. Montague further advised that the ITA and Transport Authority, both of which fall under his portfolio, have partnered to donate a driving stimulator to St. Mary High School. The minister made the announcement against the background of the over 444 road fatalities recorded for the year up to Tuesday. The minister also said driving stimulators are being introduced at the depots for learners to demonstrate their ability before they do the yard test. Mr. Montague advised that this facility is being piloted at the Swallowfield Depot in Kingston. Omicron COVID-19 variant detected in traveler in isolation in the Cayman Islands. The Omicron variant of the virus which causes COVID-19 has been detected through genomic sequencing in a test sample from a traveler currently in isolation quarantine in the Cayman Islands. Omicron is a SARS-CoV-2 mutation that was first identified in South Africa in November 2021. The World Health Organization had named it a variant of concern due to a high number of mutations with the potential to impact the behavior of the virus in unknown ways. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Newton explained that some early studies of the Omicron variant have been completed and more are underway to assess its transmissibility, the severity of illness, and the effectiveness of the COVID-19 vaccine against the variant. Reminding Caymanians and residents that COVID-19 vaccination clinics remain operational across the 3 Cayman Islands, Health and Wellness Minister Sabrina Turner urges individuals to also practice basic COVID-19 prevention measures. These measures include hand hygiene, social distancing, limiting attendances at large gatherings, and wearing masks in enclosed public spaces. Premier Wayne Panton notes that the Cayman Islands has over the last few weeks tightened testing and quarantine processes for travelers to minimize any risk posed by the Omicron variant. Cuban woman living in Portmore reported missing. The police are seeking the help of the public to locate a Cuban woman who lives in Greater Portmore, St. Catherine, and who has been reported missing. They say 34-year-old Yenny Campbell was last seen in the community of Silverstone on the afternoon of Friday, December 10. She is of brown complexion, slim build, and is about 5 feet 3 inches tall. Reports from the Portmore police are that about 4:30 p.m., Campbell was last seen at home. Her mode of dress at the time she went missing is unknown. Anyone knowing the whereabouts of Yenny Campbell is asked to contact the Portmore police at 876-949-8422, Police 119 emergency number, or the nearest police station. Businessman convicted in Oaklands murder case loses bid to go to Privy Council. Businessman Stephen Coswell, who killed his girlfriend inside her home at Oakland apartment in St. Andrew in 2008, has failed in his bid to the Court of Appeal to take his case to the United Kingdom-based Privy Council. The court ruled on December 10 that the issues raised were not of exceptional public importance. Coswell was convicted in September 2016 of killing Nadia Mitchell, his girlfriend of 8 years, at her home. Evidence was given that at the time of her death, she was in another relationship after ending her romantic relationship with Coswell. A witness had testified that Coswell was at the apartment on the day that Mitchell was killed. The prosecution had described his relationship with Mitchell as a case of fatal attraction. The body was found in the yard of the gated complex. The body had 27 injuries, 19 of which were inflicted before she died. Coswell was sentenced to life imprisonment and ordered to serve 20 years before he can be eligible for parole. He appealed, but in November last year, the Court of Appeal upheld his conviction and sentence. In his application for leave to go to the Privy Council, he claimed that he was deprived of his right to a fair trial due to delay, the unavailability of witnesses and potential exhibit, and the trial judge's failure to put his case adequately to the jury. In dismissing the application, the court ruled that Coswell 45 failed to satisfy it that any of the questions called for an interpretation of the constitutional provisions. The court said further that the question posed and issues raised were not of exceptional public importance, wherein it is desirable to the public interest that a further appeal should be brought. Queen's Counsel Gart McBean represented Coswell, while Queen's Counsel Jeremy Taylor and Crown Counsel Nicholas Edmond represented the Crown. Please remember to subscribe, like, share, and click the notification bell for daily updates.